In this video we're going back to the very early days of motoring. This is a 1928 Austin 12 Heavy with Clifton Tourer bodywork. To me this is Gumdrop. I don't know if you read the Gumdrop books as a child, I certainly did, and it was one of these that featured in those stories by Val Biro. So all the more fascinating to finally get hands-on with a car I've been reading about since my childhood. So what a lot of people don't realise is this car was hugely significant to Austin. When it was launched in December 1921, Austin was in the hands of the receivers. Things were not going well. But Herbert Austin had poured all his hopes after the First World War on a single model, the 20, which had a 3.6 litre engine. It's worth remembering the early days of motoring. Motoring was for the aristocracy. It was for people who lived in houses like this. But after the First World War, there was more of a movement towards more affordable cars. So rightly, Austin developed the Austin 7, which came out in 1922, but it was this car that sold in very strong numbers and would have had a slightly greater profit margin, I imagine, which really saved the company. So it was launched in 1921. It had a 1.7 litre four-cylinder side valve engine initially, later extended up to 1.9 litres and a whopping 27 brake horsepower at just 2,000 RPM. Let's take a look at the powerhouse. So we've got one of these side open bonnets, which always makes me slightly nervous. Little springy catches down there, and then you lift up, carefully avoiding the headlamp, and flop the bonnet over on the top. And here is the side valve engine. So 1.9 litres. It's got thermosiphon cooling. If you come round, you can just see we've got the radiator up here, and yeah, that is what actually drives the cooling system. Look at this dinky little carburetor. I'll bring you in closer for a look. So this is where the air comes in, no air filter, a little fuel bowl here, and you richen the mixture by adjusting the choke, which controls this flap. And if I pull the controls, you can see how it just reduces the air that can go into the engine and thereby richens the mixture. Here we have an auto vac, a fascinating thing. The fuel tank is under the driver's seat, and this uses vacuum from the inlet to bring fuel into this device, which is then gravity fed down to the carburetor down here. You have to kind of let it fill up before you start the engine. But yeah, fascinating bit of technology. In fact, we'll start it up while we're here. We just flick that switch to magneto, and I'm going to come in and press the floor starter button. I didn't think this one through, folks, I'll be honest. And then I've got to flick this switch again. That makes the dynamo operate, so we're actually charging the battery. Oh! But yeah, I wanted you to hear it running. Just listen to that. It's just absolutely beautiful. It doesn't really rev all that much. Maximum power is produced at just 2,000 RPM, but it sounds like a machine. We should turn her off again. Just beautiful. So we've got the dynamo down here to do the charging, and we can select whether that's engaged. So when it's running on magneto, it means it's generating a spark just by turning the engine over. So you've got no dynamo load on the engine. So it makes it a bit easier to start, especially when it's cold. Steering by box, as you can see down here, there's the linkage. And this being a later one, it has four-wheel brakes, but they are cable operated. There is one of the brake cables. When these first came out, you had a foot brake that only worked on the rear wheels, and I think there was a lever that operated on the transmission. So uncoupled brakes made life rather terrifying, but it's just a fascinating piece of engineering. As you can see, even the door handles very much like an old stagecoach in the way they operate. Masses of rear legroom, huge running boards as well, and these sort of artillery style wheels, steel wheels. Suspension by leaf springs, as you might expect. There's a full hood that comes over, and then you can have side screens which will slot into these holes variously, so you can try your best to keep the rain out. But an absolutely beautiful car. Spare wheel on the back, no boot whatsoever, not even the luxury of rear lights. Another neat touch look, fresh air ventilation coming straight in to the car, should you wish. So getting into it, the biggest challenge is the steering wheel. It comes so low, you've got to really squeeze your legs under it. But we've got a control here for the throttle, so that's throttle closed. But if I operate that lever, you can see the throttle pedal itself actually moves. Cruise control, folks, this is advanced stuff. We've also got a control for the magneto. We can adjust the ignition timing. So the magneto is what provides the spark on these older engines. So if you were starting it by hand, which is entirely possible, you would move the magneto to the retarded position. Makes it much less likely the engine's going to kick hard back on you. But we're okay, we're using the electric start today. The dials, we've got oil pressure over there, a clock, there's the charging. So this is where you go to magneto and dynamo, and then you've got light controls here as well. There is a funky little speedometer, a lovely little dial, and that's our choke control. Down on the floor we've got the starter button and the clutch pedal. The clutch has an alarming amount of free play in it, and that is the full operation of the clutch. That's off, that's on. So it is like a button, very much like an Austin 7 in fact. Lovely gear shift gate, look at that. That is just like in a Ferrari. So there we go, you can kind of see the rods operating. We've got a reverse lockout to stop you accidentally selecting reverse. Beautiful bit of engineering just in that lever. And then the handbrake, slightly more conventional. We've got glove boxes each side. Here's the other vent, so this vent's closed for fresh air, but we can open it should you wish to get a bit more fresh air, as if having the roof off, you know, that's really all that important. But yeah, mostly look at the rear leg room. And of course you'd have to use some of that space for storing your luggage as well. But we should probably get on the road. Test the klaxon. Right, let's go for a drive. First, the difficult business of trying to fold your leg through the gap here, well, that jabs you in the bum, and get your leg under the steering wheel, which is considerable. They're not slam locks, so just make sure that's in place. So as before, we go to the magneto position, start the engine, checking we're in neutral. Yep. And it's away, and then we get the dynamo selected, so we're charging. So down on the clutch, which just feels like you haven't moved the pedal at all, lock it into first with the proper gear lever, considerable lever, handbrake off, and we've already got lock on. You can hear the air being sucked into the engine because there is no filtration. I'll take it nice and steady on this first section, but it just potters along. That's it. That's on tick over. We're barely moving. It's extraordinary. A big, heavy steering wheel, but yeah, you need the leverage. Steering is quite heavy. And this car has seen lots of use at this museum for a very long time. It's often used for school visits, so if schools visit, they can often go out for a ride in this magnificent vehicle. We can go a bit faster and up to second. Double the clutch. And there we go, second gear is achieved. It all feels so very, very mechanical. No windscreen wiper to demonstrate, I'm afraid. That was still a novelty, it seems, even as late as 1928. Now we get to really open her up. Third gear and we're away. But then the jump up to fourth gear, quite a long one, very tall gearing in fourth, so you can do a decent speed down the road. And now I've got the problem, I'm going to get back into third gear again, so let's see how this goes. Double the clutch. Yes. Rev blip my way back into third gear. Keep an eye on the bus, make sure the bus isn't leaving yet, we're alright. There are no indicators, so it's hand signals only. It actually picks up speed quite well. These springs don't offer the most cosseting ride, but this feels like it wouldn't actually be too bad out on the open road. So these cars very much turned around the fortunes of Austin, made a huge difference. I think by 1950s, Austin was in a dominant position in the UK car market because of cars like this. But the pedal layout is entirely conventional, and that certainly wasn't true of all cars in this era. The centre throttle pedal was still quite a common idea. Very confusing if you drive one of those, but I can cruise control. I'm going to try second. Second I've not managed to get into at all. There we go, beautiful. Took 2 attempts, but got there without the crunch. Didn't even feel the gears mesh. That's when you know you've got it absolutely spot on. It feels like you're changing gear far too early, but that's just what they're like. Engines didn't rev in the same way in the 1920s. It's incredible to think this car is getting on for 100 years old. It still works so well as a car. The steering isn't fighting me as much as I thought it would. Early Austin 7s kind of weave all over the road. This isn't too bad at all. I was told you never cross your arms while driving a car that has controls like this, and I'm going to demonstrate why. I'll just go back to the safety of the arena. So the problem is, if you cross your arms over the wheel, you could catch the throttle and find yourself accelerating out of control. So you must always feed the wheel. What a splendid motor car. Still showing good oil pressure there, an entire 20 pound-foot. Woof. Certainly giving visitors to the museum something to enjoy today. The considerable sounds of the motor car. So that was the delightful 1928 Austin 12 Heavy Clifton. If you're wondering what that refers to, by the way, in 1931 Austin launched a new 12, which was a bit lighter. So they called the preceding one the Heavy. And I just remember that so much from the Gumdrop days, because Gumdrop was described as a 12 Heavy. But yeah, wonderful experience. So thanks ever so much to Bewley for letting me come along and play with some of their cars. It's been an absolute joy, and it's definitely somewhere you need to visit. So thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you in a future video. Farewell.